The dusty attic of the manor smelled of cedar and old paper, a scent that always preceded Grandad's best stories. 5-year-old Arthur sat cross-legged on a moth-eaten rug, his eyes wide as his grandfather, Thomas, opened a heavy, scarred leather trunk. "You see these, Arthur?" Thomas whispered, pulling out a faded logbook and a tarnished silver whistle. "These aren't just toys. They're keys to a time when the sky was filled with giants." Arthur leaned in. "The Spitfires, Grandad?" "Oh, yes," Thomas smiled, his eyes clouding with a memory 70 years old. "The Spitfire and the Hurricane. They were the knights of the air." The Hurricane was the workhorse, sturdy, reliable, taking the hits, while the Spitfire was the dancer, all grace and speed. "But there's a story I've never told you. A story about a ghost in the clouds and a mystery that saved 1,000 lives." "It was late in the war," Thomas began. He had been a navigator on the Lancaster bomber, a massive, 4-engined beast that carried the weight of the war in its belly. They called it the Grand Old Lady of the RAF. "We were flying a mission deep into the heart of Germany," Thomas said, his voice dropping to a gravelly hum. "The moon was a sliver, and the flak was bursting around us like black flowers. Suddenly, the engines on our starboard wing caught fire. We were falling behind the formation, a wounded bird in a sky full of wolves." He described the terror of being alone in the dark. Below them, the Junkers Ju-52 transports, the Iron Annies, were ferrying supplies, looking like slow, dark shadows. But it wasn't the transports they feared. "Out of the moonbeams came the predators," Thomas said. "The Messerschmitt Bf-109 and the Focke-Wulf FW-190. They were fast, Arthur. Faster than anything we'd seen, with noses painted like yellow-bellied sharks. They circled us, waiting for the kill. Just as a FW-190 dived for the finishing blow, something impossible happened. A shape streaked across the sky, not with the roar of a piston engine, but with a terrifying, ghostly whistle. It was the Me-262, Thomas explained. The first revolutionary jet. It moved so fast it looked like a blur of silver lightning. We thought we were dead. But instead of firing on us, the jet pilot did something strange. He dived between us and the other German fighters, forcing them to break their formation." "Was he a good German, Grandad?" Arthur asked, breathless. "In war, boy, things aren't always black and white." But that wasn't the mystery. The mystery was the third player in our game. Thomas leaned forward. From the shadows of the clouds, a twin-engined wooden wonder appeared, the Mosquito. Known as the Timber Terror, it was made of balsa and birch, so fast the enemy could rarely catch it. The Mosquito pilot began a deadly dance with the jet. It was wood versus fire, the past versus the future. While they fought, our Lancaster stayed airborne by a miracle. But then, the sirens began to wail from the ground below. The Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers were rising from a nearby airfield, their Jericho trumpets screaming like banshees. Thomas described the scene with vivid intensity. The Lancaster was limping, losing altitude. They were passing over a valley where the Heinkel He-111 and Junkers Ju-88 bombers were lined up like a sleeping dragon's teeth. Our pilot, a brave lad named Miller, realized we couldn't make it home. But he saw something. A secret radar installation hidden in the forest. If we dropped our remaining load there, we'd stop the German night fighters from finding our friends. But the Messerschmitts were coming back. Arthur cried out, clutching a small die-cast plane. "They were," Thomas nodded. But then, the sky erupted. Out of the darkness, a lone Spitfire, low on fuel and miles from its base, dived into the fray. It was a heroic sight, Arthur. One Spitfire against 3 Focke-Wulfs. He spun and looped, drawing their fire away from our crippled Lancaster. In the chaos, the mystery deepened. The German Me-262 jet, rather than shooting the Spitfire, suddenly peeled away, chasing off a pair of Ju-88s that were closing in on the Lancaster's tail. For 1 minute, Thomas said softly, the sky was a whirlwind of steel. We dropped our bombs right on target. The radar station went up in a bloom of orange fire. The grand old lady groaned, her wings shivering, but she stayed level. As the Lancaster crossed back over the English Channel, the sun began to peek over the horizon. The Spitfire was gone. The Mosquito had vanished into the morning mist. When we landed, Thomas said, we found a piece of a wingtip wedged in our tail gunner's turret. It wasn't British. It was the silver paint of that Me-262 jet. And inside the metal, someone had tucked a small, silk ribbon, the kind used for medals. Why did they help you? Arthur asked, a tiny frown on his brow, trying to understand. Were they friends? Thomas pulled a small, silver model of a Lancaster from the trunk and handed it to Arthur. Sometimes, Arthur, he said, his voice softer now, even when people are on different sides, they can still do something kind. The war was very sad, but sometimes, in the darkest moments, there were tiny sparks of goodness. Like that pilot who knew we were in trouble, even though we were supposed to be enemies. He looked at the model plane in Arthur's hand. It was like a secret message, telling us that even when things are scary, there's always a little bit of hope flying alongside you. Arthur held the heavy metal plane, imagining the roar of the engines and the whistle of the wind. The grand old lady was safe in his hands now.